Hi and welcome to the course on cloud computing. We are covering a complete course where we are seeing different aspects of cloud computing, and today as part of our sessions we'll be covering managing the cloud. So we'll try to understand what are the things and objectives requirements when you are planning to move to the cloud or you are using a cloud-based service. What are the things that you must be concerned about? So the learning objectives for this chapter are: we'll discuss the components often found within a service level agreement, define and discuss vendor lock in a specific steps a manager should take to reduce this risk. Then we'll discuss a manager's potential and to use of audit logs to identify system bottlenecks, etc., and resources which are used, and list the specific aspects of the cloud deployment that a manager still must manage. Now, starting from service level agreements, when you contract with a cloud solution provider, part of your contract will contain the service level agreement. Now in service level agreement you have all the basic requirements or the legal requirements as well, as far as your cloud is concerned, all the problems and the procedures which are there, and to whom you shall contact, what would be the line of action, how fast would they respond, and all those different things are included in that. The level of the service the provider must meet, like if they must make sure that the services are up all day long, 99.999% uptime, no disconnection, and if it is disconnected, who's responsible for that, to whom you should contact, what would be the billing during that period, and those other terms and conditions. What would be the cost, how much you will be paying, if you are utilizing more resources than actually allocated, what would be the elastic computing requirements, what would be the performance metrics, how they'll be calculated, if you will have any access to those kind of logs, and the remedies and penalties for the vendor railing to meet the objectives. So if they are not meeting the basic requirements and objectives as initially agreed, what would be the terms and conditions to manage that? Now, common service level agreements, the things that we mostly see in that is the agreement goal and objective. What's the main goal and objective of the agreement? What you are actually planning or your expectations toward the service cloud service provider, and the objectives that you'll have to meet. Then the services provided and services not provided. So they list all the services which are there available to the customer and the services which are not available, or they are there with an additional charge. Maybe if you want to use certain software which require licensing, what would be the terms and conditions for that? What would be the system uptime, normally expressed as percentage as 99.99% or 9%, that what would be the downtime, and what are the measures to make sure that the services are up and running. The provider's runtime monitoring capabilities and event notification, that if anything goes wrong, if you will be notified, and the vendor would take appropriate measures to fix those problems at the earliest. Pricing to include the billing cycle policies and varies if types of the resources change. For example, if you are asking for more CPU power or disk utilization, or if you are asking for the databases which require certain licensing, what would be the terms and conditions, and how much you will be paying for those services in order to be available to your customers. The provider's technical support operations, such as such as time of day availability, call delay, and event response, and time escalation policies, etc. Sometimes the services are provided for the softwares and the applications that we are using. We have different level of agreements, and of course you are paying for those service agreements. They range from the silver package to bronze package, silver package, and gold package, and the response time in those kind of support levels are different. Of course, on a gold level, usually they make sure that your request is immediately responded, and there are dedicated engineers, maybe on premises engineers available, which would help you in case if there is a problem, or there would be a response time within 3 to 4 hours or 6 hours or by the next day. So you'll have to come up with all those agreements in your service level agreements. the availability of application and system logs as well as the customer ability to inspect them within a timely fashion, that if they have the access to all the logs and the different features on the server, their bandwidth utilization, their CPU utilization, and how fast are they updated for the vendor to check it and to make sure that services are running as promised by the cloud service provider. The provider's data center locations, where are they located, what are the co-locations, if they are maintaining the backups, how frequent are the backups maintained, and what are the restrictions. For example, there are European Union level restrictions. There are certain restrictions for the cloud service operations, for the data confidence, and to make sure that your data is not leaked out to any third party and all those things. So you'll have to make sure that where is your data located and if it's in compliance with the local terms and conditions over there. Then the provider data privacy policy, that if the data is encrypted once it's saved on their servers, or what would be the terms and conditions if you want to take the backup from the cloud service provider. If it's a multi-tenancy setup, what would be the procedures and the agreements that they have to make sure that your data is not available to the other people who are using the same servers. What are the provider security policies, procedures, and certifications, if they are following any certifications or any frameworks for the privacy of information and confidentiality of information, whether the solution will use multi-tenant based systems and applications, customers and provider roles and responsibilities, as well as the shared responsibilities, that this is our part, we are responsible for maintaining the servers, data is your responsibility, so you are required to maintain the backup of the databases, etc. So you'll choose that if the backups will be maintained for the servers and for the data by the service provider, or you will be maintaining those backups. Data ownership and exporting capabilities, that who will have the ownership of the data. If you want to export it, who is allowed to export the data and to have access to the data. System and service provisioning to onboard and to customers, like how they are making sure that the services are available to the customers around the globe, and whenever they are accessing, what's the response time in accessing those services. Cloud provider insurance and limitations of liabilities, that in case if the data is lost or if their servers would fail, what would be the insurance policy, and how you must be compensated for the loss of data or the loss in reputation in the market, how they will be calculated. The provider's reporting capabilities, format and frequency, that in what format you'll be receiving the feedback from the cloud service provider. Resolution steps to the customer should take in an event that the solution provider fails to meet the service level agreements. Now, to revisit why to move to the cloud, you'll have to think that why really we want to move to the cloud. There are lots of reasons, like for example, reduce data center capital costs. We don't have to spend a lot of money in maintaining a data center, and to have the professionals in order to make sure that the services are up and running. Improve scalability and robustness. So if you want to expand the resources for a limited period of time due to any hike in sales or anything, that helps us in upscaling the services, regardless if you are like, on the other hand, if you have the servers on premises, and if you're spending a lot of money buying the new servers, and you know that actually you'll be utilizing it during a specific period of time, then it's an overkill and a wastage of money if you're spending on servers where you'll not be utilizing it all year long. You have increased security because there are a group of professionals who are taking care of the security in the cloud. 24 hours monitoring is there, whereas in a normal office environment, during the office hours, the security personnel will be around who will be taking care of the security. But in the off-duty hours, it's a bit risky, where they'll have to on and off keep an eye on the operations. Now you'll have to get the increased business agility and growth, which is only possible through the cloud service providers. Opportunities for reduced administration through managed services, because now you are relying on the administration which is provided by the cloud service provider as well. So you don't need to focus much on those things, and you'll be focusing on your data and things which are there in the cloud. Improved disaster preparedness and business continuity. So you must have the plans that in case if your data center is flooded or due to any natural disasters, if it's affected, in the cloud-based services you have multiple backups around. So if the services are not available in one part of the region, these services can be operated from any other part of the world, because they are maintaining a thing which we call as co-location facility, and the cost effectiveness of the resource redundancy, that how effective would it be if you have multiple resources around in case of a disaster, if you want to take the backup from there. Ability to quickly leverage the new technologies, that how fast can you implement the new technologies on premises. Of course it's hard, because if you want to upscale the services and you have the hardware which is used for a couple of months only, and if you want to decommission it, there is a cost associated with that. Now if we think of as a service, if we want to have anything in the cloud and we want to use it from the cloud, we add a thing like as a service next to it. Just like if we have database, identity, disaster, security, call centers, analytics, big data, desktop support, and IT support from the cloud, we call it as a service. Now these are the solutions, and security as a service, infrastructure and a service, etc. Different services are available in the cloud, and you can access them through the cloud. Now whenever we talk about any systems or about implementing them or either moving them from the on-premises to the cloud, we always consider SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So in threats, we calculate the scalability, robustness, and the total cost of ownership. In weakness, we'll be looking at the security of it. Opportunities talks about the performance, and the threats are vendor lock-in and vendor failure. We'll be covering it shortly in the lecture. Now you must know your system's data flows, that the IT manager should be aware that how actually data flows on the server and how the cloud service provider is maintaining your information in the cloud. Often managers and developers know what the systems does, but not how it does it. Managers should create a detailed process flow diagram that shows the movement of the company's data throughout the cloud cycle. So you'll have to draw the entire data flow, that how you will access your services which are saved in the cloud. For example, the customer is sitting outside, they are trying to access their servers, and in order to access their servers, there is a load balancer in between. So if there is an additional load, it would divide the traffic between the servers so that the customers get an excellent support, and the query will be passed on to the central database, and if that database is stored in the same cloud or they are storing it somewhere else. Further, you'll have to check that if you are able to check it using the desktop computer, or those services are available through the mobile apps as well. Now we'll have to identify and formalize the responsibilities. There are certain responsibilities for the customers, there are responsibilities for the cloud service, and there are some shared responsibilities which are there amongst the users as well as for the cloud service provider. Now, cloud provisioning is after you make your decision to migrate your solutions to the cloud, you must determine how to best move the resources to the cloud. What would be the best way to move your resources to the cloud? There are lots of things to be considered in that, whether you have some legacy applications, or if you want to keep the Active Directory for authentication on premises and you want to have Microsoft Azure Server for authentication purposes. So you'll decide all those things when you are planning to move the things to the cloud. Cloud provisioning is a process of establishing a cloud resources for use, that how many resources will be available in the cloud and how many resources will be available on premises. To provision a cloud server, for example, you may need to spin a virtual server within Amazon, Google, Azure, then begin or configure the system for use. So you'll be using Amazon Web Services or Google Services and Azure based on the services which are provided by those cloud service providers. Now, we covered platform as a service, in which their platforms are used in order to develop certain applications. So if your application best suits for Google or Amazon, you'll use that cloud service provider because you can easily build the application and deploy it in the cloud, which would be available to the public. Likewise, when your application scales, you may need to provision additional servers. They come online. So what's the possibility of increasing and using the services if you are in need of it? Now, cloud provisioning considerations are: who will perform the provisioning? Who's responsible for that? Will you perform the provisioning in advance, or it would be just in time? Like when there is a need, it would automatically scale up, or you'll have to talk to the customer service to allocate more resources, etc. Are you provisioning a physical server or a virtual server in the cloud? If you want to have an access to a physical server or a virtual server, or you want to have a physical server on premises which would be accessed by a virtual server in the cloud, what is the required system configuration? For example, CPU, processors which are required, RAM requirements, bandwidth utilization configuration, and disk storage which would be required in the cloud. What are the security requirements, and how will you satisfy them that we are using certain complex encryption mechanisms if they are available in the cloud service provider? Can you automate the provisioning using the infrastructure as a code, which is like you are using infrastructure for programming and hosting your things over there? What are the metrics that you can monitor? And well, the provision results in or add a cloud sprawl, which is the uncontrolled growth of a company's cloud resources. So if you are using multiple clouds for your applications, whether your applications would be dispersed amongst different cloud service providers, or they have any tools to make sure that all the services are consolidated under one platform, or if there is a possibility of migrating the applications that you have on different cloud platforms. Now, vendor lock is a relationship. For example, if you are hosting your things on a cloud and somehow you are not in good terms with the cloud service provider, they can go bad. Even the relationships with a cloud solution provider, the agreement you sign with the cloud service provider exits the procedures your company should follow, and the provider fails to meet the agreed services level, you should breach, or the other party can breach the same agreement. So what would be the terms and conditions? What would be the safest exit from that, and what would be the terms and conditions for the billing cycle, for the penalties and all those things? So they must be considered. That said, an IT manager must be able to control his or her company data. It's not like the vendor would say that we are not giving you your data since you have violated the terms and conditions. It should be clear that who has the ownership and when the data should be available. In a worst case scenario, the manager should be able to export all the data ideally to the firm, to another provider, and can import it, so that there should be a possibility that you must be able to migrate your services from one cloud service provider to another, and it should have the possibility of simple import and export of the data. Managers may want to test that capability before the problem arises. So even if you don't have an issue with the cloud service provider, you must practice it once in a while, so that you are confident that in case if we'll enter a disagreement, how capable are we in order to shift the services. Vendor lock-in occurs when the provider does not support the data export, when the provider may provide a service unavailable through the others, or the customer is locked in the relationship with the vendor. When it occurs, a company may have to put up the breaches of its SLA because the company has no other place to move to. Sometimes you need to even involve your lawyers to look into the situation in order to make sure that you are getting an excellent solution from the court of law. Managers must consider the risk of the vendor lock-in before they enter to an agreement with the cloud service provider. Now, avoiding the vendor lock. It's a best practice that you have a cloud database and you are maintaining a database on premises. So though your cloud service provider, your application and database is in the cloud, but from time to time you must be able to export the data to your on-premises database. Just in case if anything goes wrong, you must have a copy of your data. Now, source code Escrow is a cloud provider. If the cloud provider is a small or risk company, the manager may want to arrange a code escrow agreement which places a copy of the provider programming language source code with a third party. We call it a escrow company. So you don't want to lose the programs and applications that you have developed and evolved and fixed the problems over the passage of time. So if the cloud service provider goes outside, if your cloud service provider is out of business, you must have a copy of your code saved somewhere with the third party, which you can use in such kind of situations, which provides a copy of the programming language source code with the third party. Should the solution provider fail in the future, the company can acquire and apply the source code on its own systems and to implement it to the provider solution. So either you will be able to deploy the same solution on premises and run the services through that, or if you have a similar code, if you have a similar service provider, you can simply host the services over there and run the operations from there. Now next is other key solutions that you must have to ensure the backups, that backups are in place, monitor the system logs and audit capabilities, implement the help desk and technical support procedures, provide training to your staff and even to the customers in terms of providing the handbooks that how to use, for example, HR applications in the cloud which are hosted, or to become familiar with the cloud provider security policies and procedures and define the privacy considerations over there. Now, system logs and audits plays an important role because you must know where is your data, how it's saved, who's accessing it, from where they are accessing it, and all the related details. For example, an operating system might track the logs of the system where the IP address is, when someone accesses. Likewise, an application might log who has viewed the data, when they viewed the data, when they updated the data, if the data has been deleted, who deleted it, from which IP address, at what time, what was the duration of it. So all those details are usually available in the logs. When you contract with the cloud provider, you must understand the system and the applications logging as well as your ability to audit such logs. You may use the logs to determine the performance, identity, security breaches and other things. So likewise, the export of the database, you must have the access to the logs as well, which you can export from the cloud service provider, import it on your systems, run your own calculations on it to see that who's accessing your server, what's the peak time, how can you manage it, and all those things. Your service line agreement should clearly state your ability to audit such logs, the timeliness of the log ability, and the processing of such logs on your system. Now we have technical support and help desk procedures. Depending on the solution it places within the cloud, a company may have a variety of help desk based support requirements. You can either use Zendesk or any other feature to provide a support to your customers for any problems that they are facing. So in that kind of a scenario, since the customers cannot contact the cloud service provider, they are not even aware most of the time. For example, if you are accessing eBay and you are having an issue, you must have a service online with the help of which customers can inform you that they are having any issues, so that you can immediately contact the cloud service provider to look into this issue and solve the problem as soon as possible. For most software as a service solutions, the cloud provider will provide software help desk user support, likewise PaaS and IaaS solutions. However, the company may provide more advanced technical support if they wish. That would help them to gain a better confidence of the customers if they are accessing your services through the website. Often there will be shared support responsibility in case an IT manager should ensure that the support specific or support specifics are defined within a service line agreement, that who's responsible for what kind of services, what are the levels of support. Such support specifics should clearly define the hours of support, what would be the duty hours when they'll be available, if they are available 24 hours a day, what are the procedures to escalate if the problem is not solved, and what are the pricing for these kind of support agreements. Now, training procedures are large-scale cloud applications. To be successful will often require user training before and during and after the cloud integration. So, if you are moving to the cloud, you are moving to the web-based applications, you need to train your staff, which is a general staff and the technical staff, to tell them that how you'll avail the services and to whom they should contact in case if they are facing any issues. Again, for SaaS solutions, the cloud service provider will normally provide user training. Depending on the application processing, the company may need to augment the training with their own in-house instructions, or there are trainings provided by the cloud service provider as well. Now, if it's a normal service, you can find lots of tutorials of the application, how can you use it on YouTube and on the vendor specific websites, with the help of which you'll find a knowledge base of videos, tutorials, handouts and stuff which you can read and follow upon in order to solve the problems that you're facing, or how you can run the things in the cloud. As you evaluate cloud-based solution, you should review the system and application documentation, which provides all those details on ground and online and on-demand services. Managers must plan on for budget for system training. The cloud service provider service line agreements or service level agreements should clearly define the training needs or the processes and the costs which are associated to that. Now, the security policies and procedures are that the IT manager should thoroughly understand and the provider's security plan, policies and procedures. Specifically, the manager should be aware of the provider's multi-tenancy and e-commerce processing, employee screening and use of encryption. So, if you know that you are using a service which is a software as a service and you are using it in the cloud, there are other users using the same service. What are the procedures to keep your data separate? If you are doing any e-commerce processing like using the credit cards online, what are the procedures? Employee screening, if they are hiring the employees who don't have any criminal records, and what is the encryption levels, and if you are allowed to encrypt or define the encryption yourself. The manager should examine the provider's use of firewall, how it's configured, what is intrusion detection, and what are the security mechanisms for that. Again, many security factors should be defined within the service line agreements. As you evaluate the cloud service provider, you should inquire as the security certifications they have, just to make sure that they are in compliance with the international standards and they are following the terms and conditions. Common certifications that you would see in the systems would be SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, PCI or high trust, etc. Now, for the data privacy, the cloud now houses more data and even than ever before, and the amount of the data in the cloud are doubling roughly in every 2 years. So much of this data falls into the categories which is personally identifiable information, which is your personal details which are available in the cloud, which may include name, social security numbers, date of birth, your mobile numbers, and your personal health information, which we say it as PHI, which contains the personal medical records, etc., your social security insurance numbers, etc., which are linked to your health insurance, which is available in the cloud as well. Now, protecting such data is no longer just business best practice, but it is by law. They'll have to follow and make sure that your data which is saved in the cloud is not available to the public, which are not related to that. Should your company have specific data privacy requirements such as PCI or e-commerce or HIPAA for health and the FARPA for student data, you must ensure that the service line agreement is covering all those things specifically, that you have those specific kind of requirements in your country. Now, leveraging the cloud monitoring, they are just showing the charts that you can monitor and to see in the cloud that how your services are running. Now for the capacity planning and scaling capabilities, an IT manager, however, must define in advance the key response time metrics, and the solution must be provided, and then include these solutions or measures within the service level agreement. For platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, the IT manager must initially estimate the solution capacity plan, in which it defines the resources, what are required in the cloud, what are the resources which are required on premises. The solution will need to operate this satisfactorily. The IT manager should also estimate the site potential growth, and that what is the forecasted figure, how much growth you are expecting in the next few years, and whether you have enough resources in the cloud, or with the help of the solution provider you can plan the scaling and the site resources as well as the related costs which would be associated. So you can tell that we are foreseeing we are going to expand our business, what would be the cost associated to that. So then you can match it with this cloud service provider and the other cloud service providers, that with the high capacity and resources, if you can meet up with the cost associated with them. Now, several sites within the cloud provide system performance reports that a manager can use to measure their system's current performance and their benefits from scaling specific resources, that if they need all those resources and when they need those resources to be utilized, and even if they have more resources available, if they can reduce the resources since they are not being utilized in the cloud. Now, solution testing and validation talks about the things which are related to testing the applications and validating that if the data and the record which is available in the cloud is in the right format. Just because a company provides a solution does not mean that the solution is error-free. An IT staff that uses the cloud-based solution must test the solution and periodically audit the key processing and confirm that the application is providing the correct results and it is performing as it is intended to perform. So the staff must be checking it with some data which is posted on the cloud service providers, just to make sure that it is having the right capacity and the right results available in the cloud. Then we have, in particular, a cloud service provider will often perform patch management and version updates. If IT staff should be aware of such modifications, because sometimes it happens that you have applied certain patches and after that, if your application stops working, you must have a complete record of it so that you can check that your application stopped working after certain things which the cloud service provider has applied to their servers. Then beyond functionality, which is a test, you should perform load test, for example, test the measure your solution is ability to meet the current and future requirements or demands. By performing such tests, you can identify potential bottlenecks and to predict and the scalability requirements and the future costs. That, for example, if there is all of a sudden a huge load on your server, how your server would respond in that kind of a scenario. Then we have ITIL Framework. To improve your cloud management, you should consider adoption of a framework such as ITIL, which is Information Technology Infrastructure Library. It's a framework which you can follow, or we have ITSM, which is IT Service Management, that describes and provides a baseline for information technology processes, procedures, operations, everything within a IT infrastructure. Commonly, ITIL procedures and processes include service strategy. For example, it aligns your business strategy and your IT operations and services with a focus on custom service and delivery. Service design, for example, examines the services and business providers on how the best design and to implement it. Service transition is the examining of or changing the existing or introduced new services. Service operations talks about it provides the best services for managing and improving the operations and services. Continual services are the improvements. For example, it examines the way and continually improves the services and offerings, that how can you better provide the services to your customers. So that brings us to the end of the chapter. The key concepts that we covered in this chapter are cloud provisioning, cloud sprawl, data integration, infrastructure as a code, and information technology, information library, load test, predictive analysis, user experience testing, and service line agreements with the vendor lock, etc. So that's it for today. Thank you very much.